Hello, my name is Sophia Gutierrez. My American Like Me project is on Bambadjan, Bamba. Now, his main argument throughout his entire chapter was that to be the best version of yourself is to be the coolest version of yourself. Now, what he means by this is that being yourself, authentically yourself, is the best version of you. It is the coolest version of you. It's the best one, end of story. Now, he can show his argument through ethos and through pathos, specifically because he was a new bullied kid at a new school when he migrated from Africa to the US. So he was new and he was bullied for not knowing English and for some culture things that he would do from now and again. And now he dropped those cultures when he became a teen, and he kind of started to adapt the hip-hop cool teen facade that most teenagers had going on at that point. And then in his college life, his friends kind of asked him, hey, why don't you ever show your culture? Why don't you ever represent? He ended up getting an identity crisis with his relationship, with his culture and his roots, and he started questioning why he dropped all of that and why he did what he did, which was drop his culture. And then he used his emotional baggage to actually excel in his acting career, so it ended up actually going very well for him. Now he constructed his arguments through his own experiences, from his own personal anecdotes. So he used ethos, the ethics and the credibility and the pathos, the emotions and the passion. You can see here he uses the word misleading, which can be emotional. It can be an emotional thing, or just the phrase in general, misleading the fresh off the boat African kid. That's emotional. That's not exactly a fact, although it can be, but. And then there's this ethos where he's talking about ethics, where he promised his parents he wouldn't get into a fight because he didn't want to go to jail. That's ethical, that's his credibility. Now for the past, his purpose, Bamba wanted to share a story of how he grew to accept his roots and how he had to be faced with adversity, the bullying, the losing his connection to his culture, the identity crisis, how he came to overcome it. He wants the readers to understand that being your true self is cool, despite what others will think of you for doing such thing. Now for the audience, his target audience is probably kids who are struggling and feeling disconnected from their own original culture for whatever reasons, but his story can be used in a much broader sense. It can be for anyone who's struggling with anything, because his story is flexible in that sense. But the target audience would be for those who are feeling disconnected from their culture, or maybe from themselves, from their family, etc. Now, the speaker is Bamba himself, and it's actually kind of funny because his diction is really informal. It has a certain swagger to it, and casualty. It makes it feel like he's telling you his life story as a friend rather than you reading an autobiography, say. For the situation, he's talking about how he lost a part of himself due to bullying, the pressure to fit in, and then it comes to realize that his culture was an aspect of himself he didn't want to be living without. Now, the fourth paragraph is actually where it all starts, in my opinion. Everything before that is just kind of context. So the strategy he decided to use during the fourth paragraph is that he decides to guide the audience through a personal anecdote that explains a form of bullying he experienced, which is the teasing. This is 4th to 5th grade. It's little kid teasing. It's, I like sweet milk, so I'm going to give you the different milk that you're not going to like. That's what paragraph 4 was kind of about, the school lunch, and how his quote-unquote friend gave him what he wouldn't like because it's teasing their little kids, but it would eventually grow to be bullying, actually. And the effect this has is that he gets the readers to empathize with him, and in turn get the audience to be more likely to agree to his argument. Because when you empathize, you're more likely to agree. Although that's not a very causation type of thing, but it is a kind of link that you can make. Now the appeal of the fourth paragraph is that he uses pathos, he uses passionate words, disgusting, ripped, guzzled, kind of interesting words, definitely not something just like stale, so to speak. And in turn, his diction is passionate in a negative light. He's using exclamation marks and he's cutting sentences off to emphasize what he's trying to get across, like Alpha wasn't laughing anymore, period. It's serious. There's a certain tension in that sentence, and that's what he wanted to get across throughout the fourth paragraph. And then there's the fifth paragraph, which is more about a physically active anecdote he has of how he got in a physical fight with said kid. His name is Alpha, but I think I'll just continue addressing this kid. So he speaks of the physically active anecdote, and in effect, his story gets the audience to understand how serious bullying can get, and how bad it is for kids who are simply different, and what happens. Bullying, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. The appeals that he alludes to there being a consequence to standing up for himself. And it creates a sad and a really unfair kind of tone to enter the story and the paragraph. And his diction in this paragraph is informal, but it's crude to emphasize the severity of the situation. I couldn't express myself, and I was scared because I thought I was going to end up in jail. He said he couldn't express himself. Not that he wouldn't, he's saying he doesn't have the option. It emphasizes the severity. Now, the 8th and the 9th paragraph, he starts defining what cool is in the United States. And by doing this, he's gaining control over most of the audience's opinions. It also shows how different cool is in the US compared to Bambadjan, which is where he grew up, or where he was born, in Africa. Where in the US, being dumb but just widely known is what makes you cool, while in Bambadjan, being smart is what made you cool. Now, throughout these 2 paragraphs, his diction takes on a more familiar and up-to-date tone. He uses words that you would more likely hear nowadays with immaculate, blown away, and dope. And he uses logos because he's defining something. He's defining cool. You can hear that. He talks about I saved enough money to buy my first pair of white and blue Grant Hill shoes. That's new, and that's defining what it is to be cool, to be up to date with what is cool, knowing which shoes, which shirts, which phones are popular. Now, the 10th and the 11th paragraphs, he used pathos to explain how he felt when he realized that he had lost his roots. Now, in this section right here, that was a huge question for me to answer. While I was trying so hard to become American, I internalized all the pain and anger. It wasn't until that moment that I realized I was ashamed of being American. Now, the effect is that his words during these paragraphs are gut-wrenching, and they're deep, and they're crushing. They're very emotional, almost personal, and it's kind of like we're seeing to something that almost we shouldn't be seeing, from a stranger anyway. And now getting his point across that he felt those very emotions during this time. He's getting across that he felt ashamed of being African. The appeal to this is that he speaks of a very emotional topic, his relationship with his culture. His diction turns heavy, uses words like pain and anger, ashamed, dying inside, internalized resentment and self-hatred. The impact of the realization he made, it wasn't of his imagination at all. He speaks about it all in these 2 paragraphs. He spells it out for his readers. It's not left for us to imagine how he felt. Throughout the 12th and 13th paragraphs, he starts to speak of his journey to reconnect with his culture. He makes historical allusions to powerful African Americans as examples, like Kanye West and Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Bob Marley. Now, the effect that has is that by stating all the methods he used to reconnect, we as the audience receive a general overview of the topics he dove into, and hopefully it will drive more people to educate themselves, which is something he does want. He wants people to educate themselves, and he wants people to realize that being yourself is good. End of story. But the appeal that this has is that because of the historical allusions that he brings up, he continues to speak of some traditions that he hadn't gotten the chance to explore due to the suppression of his roots, because of the bullying and the being ashamed of his culture. So in conclusion, Bamba used his personal experience as an example to his audience of what the world will do to those who derive from the norm. But stand by what you believe and be authentically yourself is the version of yourself you want to be. It's the version of yourself you won't regret in the future. Internalizing the anger and strive towards those that bully anyone with a diverse culture will only hurt yourself in the process, because you fell prey to their words. You should ignore them. His tone, his diction, his terminology, all of it speaks volumes. And only those who choose to cover their ears will miss the moral of the story. Thank you so much.